We have now quilted the quilt and we are ready to bind it. But first, I have a helper here today. He came in here, he said, Pin. They call me Pin because, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago, my son came down the stairs from his room and said, hey, Pin. Just started calling me Pin. Came out of the blue. We don't know how or where or when, but he came up with that. So that's what we are called today, or I am called today. But he said, hey, Pin, I'm going to play in your sewing room while you're sewing. Well, all I did was came in here to drop something off in the sewing room. So I guess I am now sewing. So much fun to hear him playing over there with his cars. So here he is. Tell him hi.
Hi.
Okay, on to binding. So while I'm sewing, I want you to see what he's doing.
Grass.
He's cutting grass on the carpet. Okay, back to binding. I have this quilt that we've been working on. This is the quilt we just quilted, the Sawtooth Star Quilt. And since there's all the different colors of stars in there, I wanted to make the binding the same way. I had yardage and I could have done it all the same. I could have used the backing. I could have used any color that's in those stars, but I didn't want to. I kind of wanted to make it scrappy because, well, then it's a scrappy binding that uses all those colors. So how fun would that be? So I took a couple of strips of each one of the prints and I just cut the strip. Are you jumping? I cut.
Pippin. It's super dark. That means we can rockets. Rockets.
We're going out to shoot rockets in a minute.
Rockets.
Little kid light up rockets. But anyway, I could cut these, and I cut the one strip into a 2.5-inch strip. Then I cut them about twice along the strip and came up with about this size. I didn't measure it, I just wanted about this size. So I'm gonna take all these and I'm gonna put them together, one color and then another color. And I'm gonna do it like this, where they're set at the angle like that. I'm gonna stitch across from here to here. And then I'm gonna put them together just like we do all the other binding. When I get done, I'll have a big colorful strip that I'll attach to this quilt for the binding, and then we'll see how colorful it makes the binding of the quilt. It makes it fun. So let's get started. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our fabrics and put them right side together, angled like this, so that we can sew from one side to the next, just like we do our regular binding. And we're gonna stitch it like this. Cut that thread. And then, well, it didn't cut that too good, did it? Then we're gonna cut this excess outside of that stitch line, about a 1/4 inch off. We're gonna cut that off. It's gonna look like that. We're gonna iron it open to where our binding is now one piece. And I'm gonna keep doing that with all these strips. You don't have to do the strips as small as I'm doing. If you don't want to, you can do them smaller, you can do them bigger, whatever, but this is about the size I wanted, so this is how we cut them. So now we're gonna keep going, and I'll come back to you when I get all these done. So the first thing I did after I sewed all my pieces together is I ironed it all in half. So here's my binding. So once you get it like that, we will attach it to the quilt, and we'll leave about maybe one whole strip just hanging so that we can attach the beginning to the end of the binding piece. So let me show you. I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to attach it to the side of the quilt along the edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip it either with a pin or a binder clip, but somehow attach that end piece. And I don't want to sew this much because I want that left hanging so that I could attach it in the end, just like we do all of our other bindings. So I'm going to bring it on down, and about this part where it turns a darker pink is when I'll put it under the needle, and then I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around this. I'll do my corners just like we normally do our corners. When I get to that corner, I'll show you what I'm talking about. When I get to the corner, I'm going to stop about maybe a 1/4 inch from the edge, maybe a little less, and I'm going to pull it out from the thread, from the needle, and then I'm going to put my hand here. I'm going to flip this over like that so that I have that crease right there. So now my binding is going this way, but it's just going the opposite way. So I'll put my hand here, flip it over my hand, take the other hand, hold it down. Now this binding is going the direction I wanted it to go. I'll stick it back under the needle. I'll do this on all 4 corners. And when we get to the end where we're trying to attach our pieces together, the beginning and the end, I'll come back and I'll show you how to do that. I forgot to mention, once I fold it and put it back the direction I need it going and I start sewing, I start from the very edge. You know, this way I stopped at a 1/4 inch in from this edge. This way I start from the very corner and start stitching all the way down this side. When I get about this far away from where I started, I'm going to stop and I'm going to cut a tiny sliver off the end of my binding, and I'm going to put it right here on top of where I started, because this width of this binding is 2.5 inches and I need to measure 2.5 inches, but I don't want to measure, so I'm just going to lay this here. That represents 2.5 inches. So I'm going to lay this binding on top of here, and I'm going to cut where that little piece ends, which is right there. And then I can connect these 2 pieces. I'll take this off. I'll open this one up. I'll open this one up, and I'll put them just like I did those other binding pieces, right sides together at the angle. So I'll sew them diagonally, connecting them just like we did the other pieces. Cut my thread, cut that excess little piece off of the triangle here outside of my stitch line, about a 1/4 inch out. And then when I lay it back down, it fits perfect. So then I finish sewing the binding on by sewing this part I hadn't sewn down yet. My thread, and now I'm ready to flip the quilt over and stitch the top down. So start anywhere on the quilt. Now that you've got it flipped over, you'll bring your binding up, stitch it down, you don't want to pull it over because you want even on the front and the back. So you just pull it or slide it to the top and stitch it down.
Hey, I made pigeons. Can you give me some more ice cream?
Not yet. We're videoing right now. We'll do that in a minute. Okay, I'll keep stitching this down till I get to the corner, and I'll show you how to do the corner. So just roll it to the front, don't pull it, roll it to the front, stitch it down. Every little bit you'll have to move your quilt. stitch some more. I'm almost to the corner where I'll show you how we work that corner in. When I reach this corner, I'm not normally going to cut my thread, but I'm going to cut my thread so I can show you what I'm talking about. I'll stitch to about right here, leave a little bit out. I'll take this other piece that's usually, it's like that when you get to it, I'll pull it out. I'll take this piece and hold it down like that. It causes this angle at the corner. See that angle? When I get that angle, I'll pull this side up. And then that side meets this side and it looks like that. That's what you want. So now I'm going to take it back to the sewing machine. Remember, I wouldn't have cut my thread normally. I'll get to the end. I'll make that angle. I'll flip it up. Then when I get to that corner, I'll pivot my fabrics, turn this quilt around, and stitch down this side. And in just a second, I'll show you what it looks like. So that corner piece that we did should look like that. And that's it. That's how you do your corners. So now that we're finished, this is what it looks like. I absolutely love it. And I want to show you a close-up of the binding in just a second. I love it. Now this one is a king size. You don't have to do it that big, but I love it. And I love scrappy bindings. Y'all know I love scrappy anything, but look at this binding. Look how cute. I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Pull back, listen, far, 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 pull, pull, pull. Good job, we'll get it.
I want to show you a close-up of this binding. I love anything scrappy, you guys know that. Well, this binding, I love it. I've seen scrappy binding, I've done scrappy binding, but this is one of my favorites in the scrappy binding area. Look at that. That's the close-up of this binding. It ties these squares together. So every square in here is represented somehow in this binding, and I love it. And now you could use, I did use strips because I didn't have big enough pieces to use this. You could use tiny little pieces about this big and sew them together and make scrappy binding. That is beautiful. But I wanted my strips a little bit bigger, so I didn't have enough scraps left over, nor did I have big enough pieces left over. So what I did was I just cut a couple strips, like a strip or two of each color, and then sewed them together. I cut them miscellaneous sizes, pretty much all about the same size, but I didn't measure, I just sewed them together. And that is our binding. I love it. So I hope you try scrappy binding. It is so much fun. And well, until next time, you guys have a great afternoon and happy quilting.